Jim. He's dead.
Hello and welcome to Improv Autopsy. I'm your host, Stephen Cadwell. This is part one of my interview with Benji Hurlbut, a performer at SAK Comedy Lab in Orlando, Florida. Benji has been an asset to SAK for a long time, and he's responsible for some important lessons in my improv journey. Benji is a fearless improviser who will commit 100% to what has seen partners doing. Benji will follow you out onto the flimsiest of limbs, and if you come crashing down, Benji will be there to sweep up the pieces while delighting in the whole experience. Benji can embrace a weak offer and squeeze that coal into a diamond. He's taught me volumes on acceptance and commitment and is a blast to play with. Please enjoy part one of Benji Hurlburt's Improv Autopsy. Are you doing much improv?
Just SAK, and probably on average I go once a month.
Okay.
I would do more, but it's hard with I got my two girls, and she started kindergarten this year, so now it's like, okay, if I take out a weekend night, it's hard to just take the time away from the family.
Does this give you more empathy for some of those that were dealing with this similar situation back when, you'd already been a part of SAK for a little while, so it was just when I was coming up in the aughts.
Yeah. Oh, back in the aughts, baby. Yeah. No, it gives me a lot of empathy. I remember, because, I remember I was in high school and then like college, when I was in town, when we first started, try to schedule as many weekends as we can. And then these people who, can only do one show a month, or eventually people would start quitting or whatever, and some of the old heads started quitting because of their family or whatever. I'm like, what? It's so easy. I don't understand. But yeah. 100%. I get it now. Once you got kids and just life, even if you don't have kids, once you get older, you get more commitments, and it's hard to work something like improv in.
Yeah. Especially, if it's, I think for the majority of people at SAK, and getting paid is a bonus wherever you are for improv, but the majority of people at SAK, it's a side gig, it's not their main gig, so if you got to let something go, that's going to be it.
Yeah, and I totally understand I imagine scheduling must be pretty hard at SAK. People probably dropping out a lot because of things that come up. So I also understand the frustration there now.
Yeah, yeah.
Having to deal with people missing time and all that.
Yeah.
But I'm still thankful that I have the opportunity to do that, and that I even still get paid for it. Right? Obviously, that's not the motivation, because, like you said, it's at this point in your life, it's. When I was in high school, it was a good motivation to make that money.
Yeah.
But now it's not. Now, more of the motivation is just get to see your friends again, get to do some funny, dumb stuff.
Yeah. People
actually pay to watch it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Getting into it then, you started at SAK when you were in high school, is that right?
Yes, I did in high school. So we, how we got started, it was right when Whose Line Is It Anyway was coming out on TV. And Chris Dinger, who is my best friend, middle school, high school. You'll hear more about him, I'm sure, as this goes on. But he's the one that showed us, and this is like, when not like right at the beginning of the internet, but when YouTube had just started, I think.
Yeah.
So it was like, hey, check out these clips of these guys. And, we were 15 years old, and we just thought it was the funniest thing ever. Like, what, they're making it up? This is hilarious. And we would just watch those clips and laugh a bunch. And I'm more of like a kind of like a go with a flow kind of guy, to where it's like I don't really seek out things or new things for fun, but if someone's doing it, I'll just glom onto them. And Chris Dinger is like the person I noticed in my life I glommed onto. But he gets very hyper focused on things, to where a new hobby, whatever it is, he's going to find out every single thing about it and get really into it, and then he might just discard it a few months later. So when he saw this improv thing, he started researching it. He saw, hey, this Wayne Brady guy, he got started in Orlando, and there's actually a theater here where he got started off. It's called SAK, and he researched it, and he's like, it's like a sales pitch. He's pitching to me. He's like, Benji, all we got to do. He's like, I'm about to turn 16. I'm gonna get a car, and all we gotta do every weekend, we can just go work at the theater. We volunteer at the theater, and they give us these things called SAK bucks, and these SAK bucks will pay for our classes. It's like how can you not accept this deal? We'll get in these classes for free. I was like, oh, hey, yeah, great. So we started checking out the shows, and the shows were even funnier, at least at the time, how we perceived it. Because I think it's just the effect of live theater in general versus seeing something on TV. It was so much funnier in person, and we could not stop laughing, and we were like, this is amazing. We have to do this. So we started volunteering every weekend we could, basically. I think at first our parents started taking us a little bit, and then Chris got his car, and then they just let us go with Chris Dinger, let him drive us to the theater every weekend we could. And we just, from there, we every time we were doing the volunteering, because you clean up the theater, clean up the popcorn, you make the popcorn. Sometimes you're working the cash register, which makes double the SAK bucks. So that's like a valued position that we would fight over to try. No, I want to do the cashier tonight. But you do that, and then once the show starts, they let you watch the show, and we were like, oh man, we're ripping them off. This is a great deal for us. And so we got to watch all these shows for free, and this is in the days of James Newport, Jay Hopkins, Megan White, now Megan Sewell, and then Brendan Jennings, and Matt Sewell as well. Oh my gosh, it was so funny. We especially thought Brendan was, and most people do, I think, he's so talented, but one of the funniest people we've ever met. And I think it's also because he was on the younger side compared to the other people on stage. And he just like, oh my gosh. And we just thought, if only we could maybe be like him one day and get on stage. So yeah, we just started doing that. And then we took from the SAK bucks, we were able to get a class. So we got a class. Our first class was with Matt Sewell, and we loved it. And he even, what was funny, he was like, oh, these kids are actually, they're kind of good. Why don't we just advance them to the next level? So they skipped us from level 1 to level 4 with with James Newport. And after one class with James, he was like, absolutely not. They're not good. Because we were just probably thriving off that, young high school bro energy of like, this is funny, ho, I'm loud and funny, and no scene work whatsoever.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, they need some help, which was honestly one of the best things he could have done for us. Because then we went back to level 3, which was like the scene work class. We did that with Megan. I think to this day that was probably the most formative class I've taken as far as improv is. I think early on, those early classes you get, they if they're done right, they can form who you are as an improviser.
Yeah.
And her teaching us scene work, I think, laid the groundwork for both of us for the rest of our improv careers, as you will.
How big of an effect do you think that crew, that especially Brendan, but that crew that you saw was in forming who you are as an improviser? Because I feel like I do see Brendan in both you and Dinger. Not completely, obviously. You're not mimicking Brendan, but there's definitely some aspects of Brendan's improv that I could say, okay, I see similarities. I can see where maybe that could have been an influence that stuck with you. But how do you feel about that?
Oh, yeah. They were 100% just so instrumental. And they were, to us, they were like these gods of improv. They were just so impressive. Brendan just being, just so naturally funny, and just his wit, his timing, and then to Megan being able to, she's really strong with musical improv, and James Newport also just almost an understated, command of a scene. He could come out and not do or say anything, but it would just immediately, it's one of the funniest things you've seen, and Jay, just his control of the audience, it was so just natural and effortless.
Yeah.
And there's so many parts about each of them that I admire, and I think I still see myself as, when I do improv, I don't see myself as I'm on their level, if that makes sense, because I still compare them to what I knew when I was a high schooler, and they've come back and done shows like Brendan's done. He's come back and done a show, and I remember late, this was probably a year or two ago, maybe 3 years ago. I don't know. It all blends together. But it's not that he wasn't as funny as he was back then. It's just that it wasn't like the moves he was making and decisions he was making, they weren't like totally blowing me away like they would in high school. It was more like, oh yeah, of course, and it's because like, oh, I anticipate what he's going to do because I learned it from him.
Right.
So now I have all this knowledge now, or just kind of an expectation of what certain moves to make, that they're still just as funny, right? And they're still great to watch, but I can anticipate it, and it's less of like it's kind of like being you watch a magic show, but then later on you learn how to do the tricks, right? It's not that the show isn't less impressive, because it still takes amazing skill to pull off a great magic show. But now that you know what it is, it's not like, oh, it's impossible. There's no way I could ever achieve that. It's like, okay, yeah, I think I understand this now, and I can kind of perform at that level, to where when I first performed with those guys, I was like, I am out of my element here. These people are so much better than me.
Yeah.
Why am I even here? Whereas now it's like, okay, yeah, they're just like us. They're good improvisers, and we're kind of more of like a colleague level instead of this unattainable level that they were at.
Are you able to, or do you even get the opportunity to watch much improv?
Not anymore, just because with my schedule.
Yeah.
I only have time to probably get the SAK once or twice a month, and if I'm going there, I want to be in the show if I can.
Yeah.
But yeah, and things like the Fringe Festival, which I used to go to a lot back in college. Again, that's just another thing where it's hard to set aside time from the kids, especially because I have young kids, right? They can't be going to these shows yet and staying up late to where I can't watch any shows. But I'm looking forward to the day where hopefully once they're a little older, I can like start taking them to shows.
Yeah.
And I think that would probably be enjoyable to watch, to see how they respond to it.
Yeah. What I was wondering, and I don't know if you can, I think you can answer this with a show question or watching shows, is for a while there, I think as I was kind of progressing through, it became kind of torture to watch lesser improv, or improv that wasn't so good. But I feel like at some point that even transitioned to, now I can enjoy watching that as well. Sometimes I'm laughing for the wrong reasons, but sometimes it's because if they're enjoying it, then I can enjoy it.
Yes.
It's just one of those things. Any art form, I think, the better you get at it, it's just a different perspective on the art in general.
I agree. 100%. I was going to say the same thing you were saying. Sometimes you laugh for the wrong reasons, because it gets into the it's so bad it's good category. And I think, like you were saying, probably when I was younger, I would watch bad improv and kind of cringe at it, and kind of think, oh, what are they doing? Oh no. And now that I'm older, honestly, some of the favorite shows I've seen are those those showcases after the classes, like their first show that students put on.
Yeah.
It's almost like, because they're not, I guess, influenced by the whole idea of like, oh, this is the right choice to make an improv. This is the wrong choice, or whatever it is. They'll come up with these just surprising choices that are just, I think it's so funny to me, because it's something I would have never thought of.
Yeah.
Ever. And it could be and it ends up being one of the funniest things. So now I more appreciate those shows with less experience, and kind of getting me to think like, oh, how come I wouldn't make a choice like that? Is there something keeping me back from, just making this strong, bold choice where, and if I was on stage, I would have been more cautious or reserved in that moment. It kind of makes me appreciate it more, instead of saying, oh, this isn't as good. I think there's value in almost any show. There's some shows that are bad, but
there was a guy in Chicago when we were watching the level 4 or whatever, the grad shows, basically for when your class is doing your Herald or whatever form you did. And it was at least when Kayla's group was going, and her group was really interesting because they gelled so well. Like, technically, if you looked at it, you're like, not the best improvisers, but they worked so well together, and they had so much fun that all of their shows were enjoyable. And I still think it's a sin that they weren't just moved as a whole onto a Herald team and let play. But that's not how that system works. But there was this guy in this other class that none of us really knew, but he was fascinating to watch for the reasons that you're saying. He would make these choices that were so surprising and were so funny, and we could not figure out if he was the best improviser in the room or if he was just the luckiest person on earth with those offers. It was just because you'd be like, oh, he's in trouble, and then he'd pull something out and you're like, how on earth did that happen? It was amazing.
Right. Yeah, it's I noticed that in I did improv in college too, to where these guys that would audition for the group, they'd have absolutely zero improv experience, maybe never even heard of it, but some of those people would end up just getting into improv, and they'd be just naturally just know kind of how to make choices and have a natural just comedic timing. And again, some of these choices they would make were just so kind of almost more like why can't I think of that? Why didn't I think of that? And I couldn't figure out how they did it, right? Some people just have that it factor or whatever it is.
Yeah. Was there a moment at all where things really just sort of clicked for you in terms of either understanding or realizing that this is something you wanted to pursue more?
I think I just wanted to do it really early on is when I think we wanted to keep going with improv and having fun with it. Because even before, while we were, I'm messing up the timeline, but while we were volunteering on SAK, we hadn't taken the classes yet. We actually got our youth group at church. There was a guy that for I don't even know what this was, the summer camp, not even a summer camp, maybe the summer session, whatever it was. He was doing improv classes. And we do improv classes, and there was going to be a show in front of the youth group at the end. Chris was in it with me, and another one of our friends, True Lawton, was in it. And the three of us were kind of the lack of a better word, the standouts of the class that he was doing. And then we did our first show, and the reactions we got from the audience, I think that's what hooked me.
Yeah.
Is when I first started doing my first scenes, and things I would do, even the things I wouldn't intentionally do to be funny, ended up being funny. I think that was like, oh my goodness, people like this, people enjoy this. This is an amazing feeling. I think I wanted to keep going after that, to where then after that class was over, the three of us, me, Chris, and True, we kind of started our own improv group, and we would basically travel the youth group circuits of Orlando, right? Yeah. So it's not much, but we would go to some like church youth group or something, and the three of us would put a show on, and we kind of like did a little tour on our own. This was when we were like 15 years old or something. So it was it was pretty early on. I thought I want to keep going and see how far I can take it.
What did you call yourselves? Did you have a name?
Oh my gosh, we probably did, but I don't remember it. I don't remember it at all. Because I think we changed it a lot. We would think of a name and we're like, no, this isn't hitting. Let's change it to something else. I think it would be a flavor of the week kind of scenario.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what our name was. I don't think it mattered. I think they just brought us out and just said our names.
Yeah. You weren't an entity. You were three people.
Right. Yes, exactly. 100%.
So was that your first show then? Was the youth group show the first performance you did as like performing improv?
Yeah, it was.
You said that hearing the response from the audience and them laughing at things that you weren't necessarily, that you hadn't intended to be funny, they were just part of whatever the scene was.
Right.
I was going to ask you about if you remembered the first laugh, but my thought was the way that you and Dinger are, I imagine you got enough laughs just in school that it wouldn't have been made that much of an impression on stage, but I guess it did.
Yeah, I think, I don't remember like a specific like thing I did in a scene for that first show that was like, I got my first laugh or whatever. Yeah, me and Chris were the class clowns of our high school growing up, and we'd done so many dumb things together that I cannot pinpoint the first time we did something and like, oh yeah, this is great, this is fun. I do remember oddly enough, I remember my first show at SAK, the first laugh I got, or at least the first big laugh. It was in a scene, and in the old space they had those revolving doors,
yeah,
or whatever on Amelia Street. And then you would see, there, every now and then in the rafters, a rat would scurry by. I don't know if you remember that. You could always look out in the audience. The people in the back row, you would just see their horrified faces and pointing. And it was always people in the back row that could see it. No one else could see it. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's probably a big rat. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but I just love the idea of the rat, because then they tried to get a cat to kill the rat in the theater, and the cat just pissed on everything. It didn't do anything. It just peed everywhere.
Yes.
And then they got rid of the cat, and I don't think they ever rid themselves of the rats until they just left. I think they just gave up and then just left the space.
It was always a battle, right? And I know exactly, for those that had never been to Amelia Street, the way that the stage was set up, it was what, a restaurant before SAK was there?
Maybe.
And it was converted, so they had to build risers for the seats, and then it was a real long stage. And the way the set was, it didn't go all the way up to the top of the ceiling, and so rats would sometimes use the top of the set as a thoroughfare to get from one side to the other. Yeah.
And these are big rats.
Yes. That's why the cat probably gave up. It's like, no way. Every time it peed somewhere, it was probably just out of fright because it saw a rat.
Yeah. It was like, screw this.
Yeah. They must have either, I don't know if they put out like poison, or if they put out some sticky traps or something, or if it was just because the other thing about SAK at the time, I don't know if they still do this. They were still doing it on, or you could tell me, you've been, do they still throw Tootsie Rolls?
No.
Okay.
Wait. I'm pretty sure no.
So that
now I honestly don't know. Oh my god, Steven, I don't know the last time I've seen a warm up at SAK. I honestly cannot tell you.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of the last show I did, looking at the floor. I don't remember there being a lot of Tootsie Rolls on the ground, so I don't think they do it anymore.
It may have ended when they started doing wine, because I know there's a big discussion about people ending up with Tootsie Rolls in their wine.
Oh, that could have been it. Yeah. I'm pretty sure they don't do it anymore.
So they used to, I hope they own stock in Tootsie Roll, but they used to come out, and throw Tootsie Rolls, the host did, to the audience, which, in retrospect, not a good way to get rid of rats.
No.
So, but I don't know if you remember this as well. So occasionally it'd be like, oh yeah, over the week you get in there on your Thursday or Friday whenever you're going to do a show, and oh yeah, a rat must have died under the house seats at some point during the week, and it was just the worst smell.
The smell.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my god. Yes. I remember, like, oh, rat died.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do? What do we do about the smell, everybody?
Yeah.
Show's about to start. Oh my gosh. And look where they are now.
Yeah.
Wow.
The rats or SAK?
They've come along. I don't know, both. Who
Yeah.
knows? They both hopefully went on to better things.
You were going to say you remembered your first laugh at SAK, though.
Oh, right, yeah. So on those rafters, basically, it was a scene where there were cops or whatever, and I was a thief or something. And I remember I climbed up on the top of those rafters, and I was like kind of crawling across the top of the stage, pretty high up. And then when the cops looked at me, they were in the scene, I froze and pretended to be a gargoyle. I just made this like, demon looking face, and people lost their shit in the audience. Like, they thought it was the funniest. And again, this is a show, it's a grad show, so your friends are there, your family there. It's a very supportive environment. So people are laughing for almost any little thing. But that was like the first big laugh I got at SAK, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, I'm doing this. This is great. I feel like I can do this.
You were right.
How about that? And I did. I eventually got up there. But I do appreciate because I think that was the level 1. Was that the level 1 grad show or level 4? Did we have a level 1? Man, I don't remember.
When I went through, there was only the level 4 grad show. They do a grad show for every level now, or a showcase for the other levels. But
You're right. That was a level 4. That was at the end of the levels, the grad show. And so after that, it was like, okay, then hopefully you go to Lab Rats, and then the best of Lab Rats, and then hopefully you make the ensemble. That was the progression back then.
Yes. And you did that fairly quickly then, right?
Yeah, we did. Because we got into Lab Rats right after that, and I think we were only in Lab Rats for a very brief period of time. And there's probably a few months, I guess, would be the period of time. because I only remember maybe doing like 2 Lab Rat shows or maybe 3. And then they put us into the best Lab Rats. And I think at the time, I don't know if I ever verified this, but, you know, a lot of those guys were, you know, those senior guys at the theater, they were all getting ready to move on to wherever they're going, right?
Yeah.
Either going out to LA, Chicago, or whatever. And I think they were looking to the future and probably trying to think of, hey, who's going to be at SAK once we're gone? Like, who's going to keep this, what kind of up-and-coming talent can we get to keep the theater going? And I think they saw in me and Chris two super young guys, like guys still in high school. And I think they're like, oh, what we were able to get these guys to a level where they could do the shows. They're young, where they could stay here for a long time. And so I think they were probably watching us early on, and I think that ended up helping us, at least help them trying to advance us maybe a little sooner than we should. Like I said about Matt Sewell trying to put us in level 4 right away when we had no business being there.
Yeah.
Lab Rats, we were there shortly. We went to the Wednesday night show, which is, I don't know if they called it back then, because it's Best of Lab Rats, Gen S. It's changed different names, but it was basically the best of the people who had graduated from classes doing the show. And those shows, those were some of the most fun shows, because I think it was King of the Hill format or something like that. But as compared to the weekend shows, which are, you know, none of these are, I mean, they're professional shows, but none of them are like super polished and professional, right? But the weekend show, it was like, it's okay, this is our main product, the Duel of Fools or whatever. It's 2 teams, got it. It's kind of its own set thing. The Wednesday night was kind of like this wacky free-for-all where it was a lot of us, and the crowd sizes weren't big, so we felt very free, and the tickets were also cheap. So we felt very free to like kind of just do what we want up there, and if it worked, great. If it didn't, we weren't feeling guilty about it.
Yeah.
Like, people paid $5 to be there. You know, you win some, you lose some. But those are some of the funnest, at least the times I remember having fun in Improv. That period of doing that show, man, it was great. It was Darren Veerday, Francisco LeBoy, Charles Fryerman. Gosh, he is so funny. Like, we're all together and just kind of like, a lot of it's making, just calling each other out in the scene, making fun of each other, and just kind of doing off-the-wall games that maybe you don't try out that much, but it's like, oh, let's try this out. Let's see if it works, kind of deal. And it was a great time. And then after that, when I was 17, is when they invited me and Chris, they started the apprentice program, to where they didn't have it before, but I think they were like, okay, we need to get people going, doing the shows with us on the weekend to see if they fit. Because again, I think they're all going to move on soon. So they started the apprentice program, and they had me and Chris were the first 2 to be in it. And so they had us do a show, you know, on the weekend, I think it was a Friday night, get into a show with them and see how we did. And so I did that. That was probably the most nervous I've ever been for an improv show, I would say.
Yes.
But yeah, it worked out well, and I think it was probably my going into my senior year of high school, I think, is when they told me, hey, you come we'd like you to join the ensemble with us. I was like, oh, hey, great. And now I just did shows, and I made a couple dollars at the same time. So it ended up working out great.
I feel like some of that, what you're talking about when you were in the Best of Lab Rats program, I feel like we were able to capture a little bit of that with Early Show, that reckless abandon.
Yes, 100%. The Early Show, it also had that, you know, the kind of long form elements in it as well, where we were able to kind of more explore kind of what we want and see where things took us. I'm trying to think, the Best of Lab Rats, I don't think it had any long form in it. It had some like shorter form games that could be more long form, or at least, you know, like pan left, pan right, things like that, where you could make it go on for a little longer and kind of do callbacks and connect to things within that short form scene that it is. But yeah, the Early Show, it was, I think, again, and what you were alluding to earlier with just performing with a group of people you like to hang out with, even if it's not the most talented group, the product might be better and might be funnier, because just those people, the audience can see people that like to hang out with each other and enjoy what they're doing on stage. So I think Early Show had a little bit of that too, where it was a bunch of us that also kind of liked hanging out with each other, and kind of got each other's vibe as far as comedy goes. I think that was the same on those Wednesday night shows. It was a feel that you could mess with someone on stage, or do something to where, if it was an improviser you didn't know, it would be seen as undercutting them, or
Right.
something that might offend them or whatever. But in that environment where it's good friends doing it, everyone kind of trusts each other, and we're all just having fun. Nothing's taken too seriously. Yeah, those shows ended up being they're the most fun, I think, for the performer, and sometimes that'll then translate to the audience as well. If you're having fun up there, even if it's not the best improv in the world, I think the audience just can't help but also enjoy what they're watching.
Yeah, I think chemistry and charisma can make up for a lot.
Oh yeah, that's a story of my life.
So I have a couple questions that are kind of loaded, but only loaded in the fact that there's a story that I have connected to them, so I want to try to suss it out. And I will ask you directly
Perfect.
as well, but I want to give you the opportunity to see if there's anything else other than what I'm thinking of. So is there any particular onstage fail that you either witnessed or were a part of that sticks in your memory?
Oh man, I don't know if I have a particular one. There are so many failures that I've seen and I've been a part of and I've caused. But something about improv, whereas like in other areas of my life, I kind of get, when it comes time to make a decision about something, I kind of fret over it a lot. And then once I finally make the decision, if it ends up being wrong, I'll think about it for months afterwards. Not like constantly obsessing.
Yeah.
But every now and then, out of the blue, I'll be like, oh, that was dumb. It just pops in my brain. With improv, there's something about it being made up that to where if I fail, I always fall back on this, like, what do you expect? I'm making it up. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, who cares? I made it up.
Yeah.
Whatever, move on to the next thing. It really helped me, I think, in improv to make choices, because I could quickly just, okay, that was bad, whatever, moving on. But as far as like a big fail, some of the biggest fails were less of what the scene was and more of like the kind of like the show itself, like where it was and what the idea behind it.
Yeah.
There was one show we did where it was, me, Chris, True Lawton, the three of us back in high school. Name to be determined, I guess. Just the three of us. We did a show for, I can only describe it as like a fair. I think it was Pioneer Days at the church, where we were in this gazebo, this open air gazebo, and we just I don't even think we had microphones.
Yeah.
And people are just, there's a bunch of tents where people are just walking around buying trinkets from the olden days. There's like someone with a donkey ride going around, and they were just like, just go up there and do improv, do some funny. And there's like chairs in front of us, and normally that stage is for like, they were going to have musicians, like some old timey, like,
Yeah.
that's what, or people saying gospel music. That's what it was used for the rest of the day, right? And then randomly they're like, and here's Chris, Benji, and True for some improv comedy. And we get up there, no one can hear us. No, like, and we're trying to yell and scream like, hey, who wants to do some improv? We're trying to warm up the crowd. Half of them are leaving their seats, are coming and going at all times. And it was just like, I don't remember a thing that happened during that show of value. I don't know if any scenes were completed. I think eventually we just gave up and we're just like, all right, see ya, that's our time or whatever. And it was just a total failure from that point. And one of the more, so that was probably the oldest one I can remember. And the most recent one I can remember, failure, would be 2 weeks ago. I was doing a SAK show. So I'll give you the farthest back I can remember and the earliest. And no, there's just a whole bunch in between. So we were doing the SAK show, and we're doing the King of the Hill, the 9 o'clock show. And who am I with? It's also funny that 2 weeks ago, I have the same amount of memory for improv as I do 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't even remember the details. Yeah. It was me and Charles Gray, and we were the Kings. So we've been, and we had been the Kings for a while. So we've been the most recent scenes we've been doing, and what it is, each team, they do a scene, and whoever did the best one, the audience votes with applause. Whoever gets the most applause gets to keep going. They get to keep performing scenes. So we were kind of on a streak. And one job of the host is, just to get more variety in there, if someone's been the Kings for too long, they try to give them somewhat harder games to maybe tip the balance in the challenger's favor. Right? And so Bob was the host, Bob Kodges, an amazing man. I love him to death. He officiated my wedding. Great guy. He gave us a feet of hen scene. and I see, you already know. and I don't come, I'm not in the regular SAK rotation. So a lot of these games, to set them up, I'm like, hey, can you set that up? Because I just forget how to do it the right way. And I said, hey, Charles, you want to set that up? He's like, oh, I don't know what this is. So I don't even know Charles knew what it was, but he's like, I don't know. And then Bob from the side, he's like, oh, don't need to set it up. Just go. They'll know. I'm like, okay, this is a feet of head scene. You'll see how it works. And the suggestion was Jurassic Park. And what a feet of hen scene is, I realize now, because we talked about this afterwards, you kind of set it up like a laugh and go to where you should get a serious topic.
Yeah.
Or at least this is one way to do it. A serious topic, and you try to do a scene as serious as possible, but you slowly turn into chickens over the course of the scene. Right. And when it's done well, it's really funny. When it's not, it's the most awkward and just deflating thing. And this show was kicking, right? We were doing really well. It was a great cast. People were really enjoying it. we do the scene, and I got the suggestion for Jurassic Park. So me and Charles are looking out over it, and Jurassic Park, it's on fire because the volcano exploded or whatever, and that happened in one of the movies. And then I talk about the thing I think of is what if instead of Jurassic Park we have Bird Park, because dinosaurs evolved into birds. And I didn't realize what I was doing is I was justifying the whole chicken thing. Right. When it's not supposed to be justified. You're just supposed to turn into a chicken. Yeah. So the audience just sees us. We're talking about a new bird park while we're turning into birds. And that was it. That's the scene. That's it. It ended, and it was, you could feel the energy, the energy of the show. Just deflated. Absolutely deflated. And what was worse, this was the last scene of the night.
Oh, no.
Bob made the last scene of the night. And then after that, for the toss-up to see who remains the king. Because, one team wins, and then there's two people. And then you decide who the overall winner is. You do a toss-up. So we did an infomercial endowment where you get suggestions for a product, and then the person doesn't know what it is, and we give them clues like charades to try to get them to guess it. And at the end, we do the infomercial endowment. Nothing bad about it, but nothing special. And then, all right, that's it. And I remember at the end of that, people were they were still so knocked off kilter at that feat of head scene. Yeah. That they were just so out of it that the claps were very all right, and normally we're okay, yeah, did you have fun? And we're all standing up there in a line. We were just kind of adrift. We were all just kind of walking around the stage, no energy. And Bob's okay, that's the show. And then we left. And what's funny is as soon as Bob comes back, he's that's my fault. I'm so sorry. Immediately, he started apologizing for it. But it wasn't his fault. That was probably a bad scene to place there. But I totally how I set it up and how I tried to justify it, this premise that's not supposed to be justified, I totally ruined the purpose of the scene entirely. And it was just weird and turned a great night into we'll get him next time. Yeah. kind of night.
Well, I feel it sounds to me like the audience didn't turn on you. They were just really confused. That would be my guess.
100%. No, yes. They were not boo, you guys suck. They were what just happened? Why did they do that? That was very weird. I thought they were doing improv and being funny. What changed?
What suddenly? It was really weird. It's like a 180 out of nowhere.
Yes.
The show was really
100%.
funny, and then they decided that they were gonna. And I feel like that for Bob, and I think that you were indicating this as well. But that when Bob said you don't need to set it up, just do it. Bob was trying to protect you guys in terms of giving it away. He didn't understand that you guys didn't know what to do.
Yes. Well, we had seen it before, but we just, in so long, I was like, okay, there's a way this is funny, and I was trying to remember what that is, and I just couldn't remember it till after the fact.
I was just talking to Mike about Feet of Hen.
Yeah.
And we were laughing about it because I said, Jose told me, or Jose and Richard both, I forget who, said that they'd cracked it. Because I remember we tried it once or twice at Amelia Street, and maybe even as host I called it once, and I was just like, why is this in the book? This is terrible. This does not work.
Yes.
And I remember once, maybe it was Jay and maybe Clark. It was Jay and somebody, maybe Jay and Darren, and they're like, no, we got this. We'll do it. Give it to us. We'll show you how to do it. And it just tanked. And it was like, well, there's no way to do it.
I love the confidence into failure.
And even they're like, oh, we don't know, it should have worked. Yeah, it's so that makes me laugh. So here's one I was thinking of, and I'll prime the pump a little bit to see if you remember. There's no reason you should remember that. There's two. You gave me two, I think, very formative lessons in improv through performing with you. Well, one was with you and one was just watching. So I don't know if I was in the show or just watching the show. But one of them, I won't name names because part of my philosophy now is the only thing that makes a choice wrong in improv, with some exceptions, but the only thing that makes a choice wrong in improv is the reaction to it. That's how I kind of feel now. So looking back at this, I know that there are things that I could have done that could have redeemed the scene and made my scene partner look better. But this was, an apprentice was in the scene. This was Amelia Street SAK. And the suggestion was either bagels or donuts. And you were on the other team. So the apprentice was on my team and was doing some object work to start the scene. So I paid attention to what they were doing, and it looked like they were laying out whatever either the bagel or the donut, whatever it was.
Okay.
So we'll say that it was bagels, was the suggestion. Was like laying them out or something. And I, for whatever reason, in my head, like this is an office, that we're some office. So I came through, again, the revolving door with a pantomime bag in my hand. He was pantomiming his stuff, and I said, oh, I brought you some bagels, but I see you already have them. And he said, those aren't bagels, those are donuts.
I don't know if I remember this.
And I got...
Was I laughing? Was I done?
Yes, you and Dinger both were laughing hysterically on your side of the stage. I was livid. I think my reaction was, oh, I'm sorry, how stupid of me. Or something like that.
And then it blacked out.
No, not
Did
yet.
it black out?
No.
No, okay, I'm thinking of something else.
It should have probably. What ended up happening was it went for a little bit longer. I forget. I'm going to forget exactly what the next thing was. But the next time, either you or Dinger jumped out into the scene and were in the scene and made an offer of some kind, and the other one of you said, I forget exactly what it was, a potted plant or something like that. And the other one was like, that's not a potted plant, that's a lawnmower. And then someone was like, that's not a lawnmower, that's a transformer. And so there's this little run of just completely denying what the other person said it was and calling it something else. And you guys were laughing so hard at the first part and then enjoying the second part so much. And I remember I still carried some of the anger with me into the green room because I was like, this guy thinks that he's responsible for this thing being amazing. And that was totally Benji and Dinger. Like,
how dare he?
I know. I was like upset. Like you ruined it and they made it gold and you think that you're responsible. But I mean, I also did not help. Like after that moment, I was completely out of it. And had zero to offer, like brought nothing to the table after getting angry over the stupid offer. There's a million ways to get out of that. But you and Dinger in that moment, really, I mean, that was I learned a lot in that moment just in terms of how much joy you got out of that terrible little bit of improv and how you redeemed it. You didn't. The scene was still terrible, but the audience loved it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the scene was probably you can't go much anywhere after that. But
Yeah.
if they see us having a good time with it, then yeah, I think they'll love it. Yeah, I don't remember that, but it does sound like exactly something we would do.
Yeah. And I remember those moments. I remember standing there. I remember exactly where I was standing and what happened. And the next thing I remember is there was a violin, or you said, that's not a something, that's a violin. And then eventually it became a transformer. And other one.
Nice.
The other thing, moment where you did something that really clicked in terms of improv lesson or understanding. And this, if you remember this, I'd be super surprised, because it's really kind of a throwaway moment. Watching it, it was amazing, because it was the first time this kind of thing happened. You know those moments, I mean, I've said this before, but SAK was PG-13 or better theater, so, you know, we tried not to,
right.
You don't go blue at SAK. There's
right.
not a typical thing that happens. So there are moments, and Chris really likes to kind of toe this line, where an offer's made and you kind of hold your breath. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of times what happens is, you know, if it was me at Once Upon a Time, I would try to correct or you know, course correct, or I would try to, David Charles, I think, does this a lot too, and which is why Chris would love to play with him in this way. But that just ends up drawing more attention to it. And instead of getting through it or beyond it or past it, you're just highlighting it so everybody remembers that weird thing that was said in maybe their emails. Yes. There was a show, and again, it was you and Chris. I forget exactly what Chris said, but it was something like, you had sex with my grandma. And you yesed that so hard and moved past it so quickly that it was like didn't even register on the hold my breath meter. And and I was just like, oh, that's how you do that. That's how you deal with those, is because you were like, yeah, so what? And I just remember the moment. I don't remember exactly the rest of it, but I was just like, oh, Benji was, and I didn't know, and I should have asked you then, is like, was that a conscious thing, or was that just you so in the scene that that's what you did? But it was like that could have been an email moment for like the higher ups at SAK, but I feel like because you didn't deny it, you didn't say no, I didn't, that's gross or whatever. You're like, hell yeah, I did, and yada yada yada, and then we were past it, and it wasn't even on the radar.
You know, it could just be that might just be me and years of experience of dealing with Chris Davis. Like we've been friends for so long that and you know, whenever he loves those moments. If he can make, it's almost like blood in the water to him, right?
Yeah.
If he's able to like kind of push the limit and it kind of is making you a little uncomfortable, it's so funny to him. So he likes to keep pushing that line, and it's almost like a wax on, wax off, where you know I can go with him where he's going as well, but I can also like if I feel like I need to, I can just like, you know, deflect and then move on into another arena. So I don't. It might not have been a conscious thing. It could have just been a reflex from years of conditioning, for lack of a better term.
Well, and I think both those choices, though, are the way to go, is either join in or deflect. I wish that could have been what that was a bit of a deflection, but it was masterfully done because you accepted. It wasn't like a denial or anything like that. Whereas I remember a show with, and I'll have to talk with Chris about this at some point, but a show with David Charles where I think the what I remember, and I'm sure I'm getting some of the specifics wrong, was I think Dinger was playing a kid with cancer in order to make David uncomfortable. His only joy in the world was like this pet elephant that he had, which then he endowed David as having killed. So just to watch David squirm on stage as he tried to delicately navigate around these things.
Yes, he loves it. Oh man, I love it. That's great. It's weird how it's like, you know, and I'm sure the same thing is, you know, things I've seen in other improvisers that might stand out and be like, oh my gosh, that's how you do that, or that clicks. It's like to them, it you know, it could just be something they just naturally do. They don't even know what they're doing. But to another improviser, could be like, oh, I can. This is how you do that, or I can use that, and that can like kind of affect you like going forward. So that's really interesting.
And that was also part of that Brendan energy that I thought I saw in you guys. And it might just be something you have in common versus learned or aped from anybody. Because I think Brendan is also one of those that yeses things really hard. That you just yes, accept it and take that as your mantle and move forward with it.
Yeah.
Cook County is very much like that. And I know it was one of the things that Greg would lament when we were in Chicago about just the lack of playfulness that in the improv up there, and how different Cook County was because they were so playful. And you and Chris both are very playful in the same type of way.
Yeah, and I think maybe it could just be a osmosis thing that we got from Brendan. I think any improviser starting out, one of the best things you could do is just watch a bunch of shows.
Yeah.
And also do a bunch of shows, right? Do a bunch of shows, watch a bunch of shows. Instead of some improvisers get in their heads and it's like, oh, I need to take this class and this next level of class and then read these books and do all this kind of intellectual stuff. And really it's just, if you just like watch it, kind of like live it, you play the shows, you watch shows. But when we were volunteering, we saw countless shows that Brendan was in, and not because we're like, oh, let's learn from him. We just thought he was so funny, so we would just always, like, other volunteers wouldn't even watch the shows. They would do their thing and then they would hang out and like kind of talk, hang out with each other, waiting for the show to let out. But we were always watching the show every time. And I think just looking up to Brendan and who he was in our mind as like this god of improv, and I think you just can't help but want to probably emulate your idols like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if we just kind of naturally fed into some of that energy and tried to emulate it in the own improv that we do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if that was conscious or subconscious, I think, because I would tell my students, as like, it's okay if you are trying to emulate someone, but do that until you become the improviser that you are, and then be that person. Because there's no way that someone watching can be Benji. There's no way that someone watching can be Brendan or Dinger. But it's okay if like that's your in right now.
Right.
And I feel like, I mean, I would never say that you are still trying to emulate Brendan. Like you're definitely your own improviser. But I just see some of those traits that I envy in Brendan. I also envy in you and envy in Chris. Yeah, whether it was conscious or not. But you didn't get stuck there. Is basically what I'm saying. You guys became your own improvisers. Good
to hear. That's great. I feel good about that.
Do you find post helpful or unhelpful, or are there helpful aspects of it?
I think yes and no. There could be some that are just kind of waste of time and others that are helpful. The biggest thing is everyone's different, right? Some people respond to positive reinforcement versus negative. So a post that might not be helpful for me could be helpful for someone else. So I don't, just because if I don't get something out of it, I don't discount it entirely. It might not have been meant for me. I'd say at SAK, which is kind of, it's an ensemble, but it's kind of a loose ensemble to where you're not playing with the same people every night.
Right.
You're not hanging out with these people on a regular basis. So they're not strangers, right? But, they're kind of these people you see maybe once a month. Improvisers are, in general, they're not trying to, at least the ones at SAK, the ones I hang out with, they're not jerks, right? They're not trying to seek out conflict. Now, there's a couple of them out there that are confrontational, and some of that style of improv does work. But, for the most part, the post is like, oh, hey, when you did this thing, it was so funny, or this moment was so funny. And we're kind of just, it's almost just like a recap of like the highlights. It's like going through a highlight reel.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun. Like I enjoy that, and I enjoy especially bringing up moments that maybe went awry and were really funny to me. I love doing that. That's a lot of fun. But do I get anything out of it? No, I don't think I learn anything from those moments. Like during the show, the kind of the post notes that I'll get or give is more for like the kind of like for the show itself, right? Not necessarily like, oh, and this is how you do improv, people. It's more like, hey, in this scene, these are some of the things that kind of work or don't. Hey, when you're on stage, this is like the position you should be in, or here's how you set up that game.
Yeah.
At least right now, that's what I get out of it, because I'm not doing it as regularly as I used to. So sometimes, like the feed a hen scene that I totally botched, I forgot how to set that up. And so during post, they're like, oh, first of all, you justifying it's probably not the right thing, and you could set it up this way. We're trying to get a serious topic. And I was like, oh, yeah, right. Okay. Got it. Moving forward, if we do that, I'm sure we'll do that scene again. But when we try to attempt and reach for the unreachable and try to make that funny again, I'll be a little better armed next time.
Yeah.
But yeah, those things are helpful. And then every now and then, I like it when people say, "Hey, in this scene, this is how I felt," or "This is the message I was receiving."
Yes.
Because sometimes there might just be a miscommunication. I was like, oh, I got it. So in that moment, how I came across as this. And it makes me kind of, reflect and be like, okay, so, maybe if I was playing with Dinger, he would have picked up on that immediately. This person, it's not that they're any worse or any better.
Right.
They just like, okay, they don't understand that because we don't have that kind of relationship or vibe going on. I think that's helpful. But for the most part, like during the shows at SAK, there's not a lot of like, here's how you do improv or do it better
right.
or whatever. I think that would come in, classes or workshops, things like that, to where we're actually like getting into the scene work and how we do scene work. And that stuff is I learned, obviously most of my stuff that's had an impact, I learned from there.
Yeah. I think, I would agree with you. I feel like the post is at its most beneficial when it's the interpersonal tune-up, when it's like, oh, okay, yeah. We weren't on the same page, and this is why, like you said, it's something Dinger would have picked up, and this person didn't, and now you know that, and you can, moving forward, you'll be aware. But it's nothing to do with the craft, and all to do with relationship with people that are in the room.
Right, exactly, yeah, I agree.
That's the end of part 1 of my interview with Benji. Listen to part 2 for some more of Benji's improv journey and his answers to my evolving Proust questionnaire. If there's someone you think I should interview, a question you think I should be asking people, or you want to get in contact for any other reason, you can reach me at improvbrain@gmail.com. You can also find bonus content very soon on the Improv Autopsy Patreon site if it's not there already. If you're enjoying the podcast, leave a review wherever you listen. Word of mouth is the best form of advertising. If you aren't enjoying the podcast, keep it to yourself. It's just your opinion and nobody cares. Thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.